Hello and welcome to the ROKER RAPPORT Extra Pod. I'm Brett Lyons-Davis and tonight we are talking about, well, in the words of Phil Parkinson, a very, very good 2-2 draw v Rochdale at the Crown Oil Arena. Plus, we'll be, looking forward might not be the right word to use, but we are looking forward to Saturday's game away to Gillingham. I am joined by Chris Wynn in Sheffield. Chris, how you doing?
I'm not too bad, Brett. Thank you very much.
Good man. It's always nice to have you on board. I thought I'd give you a really short introduction this week.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to getting into this fantastic performance, as Parky described.
I wanted to jump straight into it, and as soon as a defeat comes along, one man jumps at the opportunity to say his piece. That's one of the locals, Craig Chapman. Craig, how you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you for having me on. It's a baptism of fire, perhaps, that we're going to be talking about another excellent display, but here we are.
I know, it's all gone a bit wrong all of a sudden. So we took the lead after 15 minutes. Some good footwork, actually, from Lyndon Gooch. Crossing to Charlie Wyke, who heads it to open the score in 1-0. Rochdale equalise on the 25th minute. Matty Lund runs into the box, completely unmarked to head in. Bailey Wright scores a second on 40 minutes, headed in and deflected Gooch's shot, although to be fair, the keeper really should have done better with that one. And then just for half-time, Rochdale equalise again, scrapping the box. Again, though, Matty Lund finds himself with acres of space and pulls it back to his tool at half-time. Second half, not a great deal to shout about. The lads huffed and puffed, had a couple of chances, one in particular being Max Parrish having a shot cannon off the bar. But it fizzled out and we drew 2-2. Chris?
Where do we start? It was a truly awful game. It was actually painful to watch. It was difficult to watch. It was difficult to keep your focus on actually watching the game. To say it was just an awful game, two awful teams slugging it out, trying to get all 3 points. And when I say slugging it out, I don't mean try and bust in a gut to get a goal. It was just catalogue of mistakes by both sides just giving away possession, getting into the final third and then just kind of melting. Both sides just had no clue when they got into the final third. And actually I thought both sides were pretty even. Rochdale just survived relegation last year, where obviously, got different aspirations in League One this year, and both sides just looked even. And it was kind of following, from my point of view, I think it was following a similar pattern to pretty much every game this season, other than, that the opposition actually kind of gave us a headache in terms of putting us under pressure on the ball. But yeah, it's just same again, and, a slightly different result from usual, but I don't see it was hugely different to what we've already seen this season.
No, I agree with what you're saying, especially that first part there when you said that it was difficult to sort of keep concentration on the game. It had a real weird feeling about it. I don't know if it's like one of the first ones, an evening kick-off with an empty stadium. It felt very non-league almost, that it was a really hard game to actually watch and keep your focus on. So I do sort of agree with what you were saying there, Chris. Craig, I'll jump straight to you. What are your sort of initial thoughts on the game? Obviously, we will delve a lot deeper into it.
Well, I just wrote minging on my notes, and I think that was probably the most accurate assessment of it. It was a bit of a bizarre one because, we came out with the talk about, we needed an instant response from the Portsmouth game. And from the offset, I thought we were second best for large parts. Rochdale started on the front foot. They, like Portsmouth, kind of cottoned on to the way that we've been playing. They pressed us in the early stages. They put us under a lot of pressure. And when we did eventually, kind of weather that storm and get a foothold, I think the nature of this league is because teams are that poor, we pretty much score with our first real meaningful chance of the game, and you think now's the time to perhaps go a kick on. But I don't know, it's exactly like what you've both addressed so far. We were sluggish, lethargic. There wasn't very much of a tempo about it. It just had the hallmarks of a game where a neutral would perhaps look at this and maybe consider this two mid-table teams or bottom half teams who were more than evenly matched. And I mean, in respect of Rochdale, they were more than deserving of the point. I thought were absolutely horrendous. I thought the team selection was a bit all the pot. There's just not many positives that you could really take from it at all. And what's really, really alarming and really worrying is the fact that we seem to be kind of revisiting history somewhat again. And when we should have been looking for an enormous response and putting a statement out and going down there and winning convincingly, we've come away again, and it's leaving us with more questions rather than answers.
No, that's definitely it. And I think one of the big questions, what has happened to our defence? Before last Saturday, so we're talking literally, 5-6 days ago, we actually had the best defence in the country, and all of a sudden we've shipped in 5 goals in 2 games. Chris, can you even put your finger? Was that defence actually as good as was being made out at first, or has it all just fallen apart all of a sudden? What's going on?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a case of the defence falling apart. I think I said last time I was on a pod, and I can't remember when that was, a couple of weeks ago maybe, I said then that basically the level of opposition this season so far had just been awful in League One. I mean, apart from that period, when I was saying those comments, I mean, apart from that period, first 20 minutes, half an hour of that Peterborough game, nobody had really put us under pressure in terms of the way they played, pressured us on the ball, looked like they were actually going to score, looked like they were going to create a chance. And then we came up against a Portsmouth side, and you could tell we absolutely panicked against Portsmouth, that we had a team who thought, actually, while these in possession in their own half, we're actually going to put them under pressure and actually put a tackle in. And we panicked, and we didn't know how to handle it because nobody else had done that. So I don't think our defence has suddenly fallen apart. I just think our game plan is around slow, methodical, trying to break the opposition down. It's almost like a war of attrition where we bore the opposition into scoring a goal. And
but bore the fans a lot.
Yeah, and so what's happened in the last couple of games is Portsmouth put us under pressure, we panicked, and then we lose possession in kind of the final third of the pitch. And the first goal came from that. And once you go a goal down, I mean, all right, we got one back, but then we were kind of shell-shocked and didn't quite know how to handle it. And then we conceded another one, kind of giving away possession again. And then the third was Luke 09 when we're chasing the game. And Rochdale wasn't exactly kind of the back three being kind of awful. It was just our organisation and not picking up players. But again, it was because Rochdale decided to put us under pressure and we panicked.
I think as a glutton for punishment, really, I looked back at the goals prior to recording tonight, and in every single one, they were all avoidable. They were all silly mistakes where, you know, we've been forced into it. And I think you're right in that respect. The level of opposition in recent games, they've stood off us. They haven't had the, you know, kind of the balls to really come and have a go at us. And now I think that somebody's actually cottoned on again to say, you know what, if you take the game to Sunderland, that's where you put them under pressure. That's when they begin to crumble somewhat. And that's when we really look vulnerable. And again, last night, you think, address those mistakes, ensure that, you know, that our vulnerabilities aren't being exploited. But lo and behold, again, some of our decision making across those 5 goals have been really, really bad. And we've been kind of celebrating the defensive record. And I know it's kind of bit us on the arse a little bit now, but whilst I think there is, you know, kind of cause for concern, I think it's important, obviously, that we do look at the bigger picture and say that we do certainly have the capabilities of keeping clean sheets, but we need to ensure that the defensive line remains as tight-knit. And hopefully Jordan Willis will return to full fitness soon, but whether it's a case of, you know, kind of too many changes in quick succession, who knows? Perhaps, you know, really just clutching for straws here. But the last 2 games have really been worrying.
The perfect thing we said there was about sort of like the changing around the team, because it started off the start of the season with Willis, Wrights and Flanagan at the back, and they were pretty solid. And say there has been chops and changes going on. Luke 09's come in, McLaughlin's come in. We also had Dion Sanderson come in. What were your thoughts on his performance, though? Can you think he can sort of push himself into that sort of back three? Were you impressed at all with him? And as a bit of a baptism of fire, Craig, I'll jump straight back to you with that one.
Considering he hasn't really played much competitive football, I thought he'd done okay. I mean, that being said, we're saying it's okay, and it's still a 2-2 draw away at Rochdale. So in hindsight, it's not really good enough. I thought that at times, you know, he was maybe a little sloppy in possession. Obviously, the collision with George Dobson for the goal was bad, but I thought beyond that, he grew into the game somewhat, and he looked all right. But that being said, I would still not be confident if he was going to be a first choice selection. Ideally, when we're back to full fitness, then you would expect the partnership of the 3 to come back in. But I think he'll do well. I think given the opportunity that he'd be all right. But again, it's one of those things you've got to look at kind of long term. If he does become a success here, then that's it really. He'll be returning back to his parent club, and we're just going to be kicking the problem down the road again. So yeah, I've got faith that he'll do okay. But that being said, ideally, I would only want to see him come into the team as and when needed. I wouldn't have him as a starter, not just yet.
No, Chris, what are your thoughts on his debut?
Yeah, he looked all right. It looked like he can handle the ball. It looked like quite comfortable in possession. I mean, it was a couple of nervy moments, but I'm putting that down to kind of being match fit. As Craig said, he hasn't played much football, and he's come in. He's young, and he hasn't actually played much kind of, you know, like football league kind of football. So it was always going to take him time to kind of get the pace of the game, but he didn't look out of place. He looked like he was strong enough. He was decent in the air. So yeah, he looks like I think he could be a good loan signing.
There was big question marks, although we also like talking about the defence there, that how much the midfield helped the defence. Power and Dobson, if you look online, have both come in for massive amounts of criticism, and probably rightly so. I think for that, both first and then the second goals, the midfield could have helped out more. Chris, where do we go with that midfield?
Well, they were awful, weren't they? I was really surprised, actually. I mean, I put on the preview what I thought the team was going to be on the website, and I was fairly sure that, because Ledbetter had made that mistake, that I always think that the best thing that a player will want after something like that is to be back in the team and back into it. I don't think he would have wanted to be taken out, and I'm sure he was chomping at the bit to kind of make up for that performance at Portsmouth. So it was a bit of a surprise. But I think looking back to the Bristol Rovers game on the opening day of the League One season, when George Dobson was in there and had a shocker that day as well. Mm-hmm. But I think that's what Parkinson set out to do this season. That was his original plan. He originally wanted George Dobson to play in that role. So I think he saw this as his first opportunity. That Ledbetter made a mistake, and he thought, right, well, I'm going to hook him and get George Dobson back in there, see how he does, because I want him to play there. But he's had 2 games there, and he's been crap twice. I mean, basically, couldn't keep possession at all. Didn't really look for the forward pass. Max Power, I don't really get Max Power. I don't know what he is. I don't think he's an attacking midfielder. I don't see him as a holding midfielder. I don't really see him as a box-to-box midfielder. I don't know what he is. And I know we've been trying to play him in that advanced role, but he's hardly been kind of laying off chances or sliding people in or creating anything or looking like he's going to score. I mean, all right, okay, he hit the bar, but, that's been a bit of a kind of anomaly for this season for Max Power. So Ledbetter, when he was in there, he made that mistake against Portsmouth. Players make a mistake. I'm sure he wanted to come back and get over it, but he's the only one who's really looked comfortable in those midfield roles this season. So, and relying on someone like Ledbetter, who might not be able to do the Saturday Tuesday routine too often, is a bit worrying. So Dobson and Power need to either find a role that suits them or try and work out what they need to do in these current roles and find some form.
Craig, you've been nodding away with Chris just there. So for yourself, Power and Dobson, it looks like one of them's got to play, really. Out of the formation that Parkinson's plays alongside Ledbetter. What do we do with them? What do we do with that problem in the centre of the park?
I think I was just laughing along because it was kind of like the nail on the head. My exact notes is we've had Max Power for 2 years, we've had George Dobson for 1 year, and I'm still none the wiser as to what exactly either role is in the team. I mean, George Dobson, when we brought him in, for example, he was kind of touted as like a captain leader that were brought in from a recently relegated team who was supposed to be so much better. But we're a year down the line. He can't really contribute in respect of goals or assists. His passing is substandard, and that's been kind. There's just not really many positives, if any, that I could find about him. And there was a lot of people who used to criticise George Honeyman when he was in the team, and he took a lot of flack. But I think if we're kind of looking at, say, like kind of comparisons for progression and obviously our desire to get promoted, ideally, if you're selling a player and bringing in a replacement, he has to be better. And George Dobson he's done nothing in a full year. I would honestly look towards January and see if there is actually a team out there who would potentially take him off our hands, if we can recuperate any money, or if we can just get him off the wage bill, because he just offers us absolutely nothing. And Power's a funny one because, again, we've had so many variations of what he's supposed to be. We've been told he's the box-to-box, the Rolls-Royce player, this, that and the other, he's the leader. But I really don't see any attributes that would actually make me think that he could be a success in this division and that we could actually carry that forward into next season. I'm not 100% sure. I think he's in the last year of his contract, but I would not be kind of upset if it was the case of that ran out and we'd never see him play for Sunderland again. I think there's zero creativity between them. They don't complement each other very well at all. And there must be an absolute dream to play against, because it just seems that, kind of if you run at them, they're very slow, they're both very pedestrian. They just don't have anything about them, either one. And whilst you say, obviously, we do have to accommodate one or the other because we don't really have much beyond that, I would have expected Grant Ledbetter in the side. There was a lot of rumours online to say that there was perhaps a falling out. Again, we've got nothing to validate that. But that being said, if it is the case that we're going to maybe look for alternatives, then, we've got somebody like Dan Neil, who's been chomping at the bit. He's played well in the EFL Trophy games when being involved. He's done well in pre-season. So what I'd be looking at is for somebody like him. I think for somebody like George Dobson now, he's had so many chances, and we've seen what we get with him, and it's just not good enough. So I'd be looking at alternatives. But that being said, we're in such a kind of a precarious position at the moment, where 8 games in, 11 games competitively, we still have no idea what our best lineup is.
No, that is the frightening thing about it. And I think also the fact that Parkinson is so rigid on this formation that he wants to play, and he's obsessed with it to the point where he will play players out of position. Luke O'Nien the other day playing a centre-back when he's clearly not a centre-back. Yeah, he played one decent game in midweek against Crewe, but that isn't his role. It worries me a lot when you mentioned Dan Neil there, that a Dan Neil, Kimpioka, a Jack Diamond, they're not even making the bench to make any kind of changes in his team. And again, that's why I say he's so rigid, that his strikers, you know what you're going to get. White's going to play for 80 minutes, he'll come off, Graham will come on, or Grigg will come on. It's very concerning that he has no plan B whatsoever, and also concerning that there's no plan B, but also it doesn't concern any of the youngsters who should be getting some game time now, surely.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did. Sorry for cutting in. He discussed the idea of the 23s working as a reserve team, and that the opportunity would be there to forge that path to the first team. That was one of the arguments that essentially was going to keep Aiden McGeady out of the picture, because we wanted to give said opportunity to the young lads. Now, you've got somebody like Diamond who has performed well. He took his goal very well in the game against Carlisle. Again, he played okay in pre-season. Neil, when he got involved, I think he looked like a player beyond his years, actually. He was very calm and composed on the ball. He was threatening. He drove possession forward. Benji Kimpioka, again, he's had an awful lot of criticism in terms of whether he wanted to be here or not. He subsequently renewed his contract. He's back now, so therefore, if he performs, he should be in the picture. And I think he scored, 6 goals in the past 3 or 4 games in the 23s. Now, if we're, say, devoid of, any sort of creativity, if our strikers aren't performing, then surely somebody like him should be coming in as an alternative, because his like-for-like selections, you're looking to basically go out and win the game, and you take, say, Charlie White off, you bring Danny Graham on. It's pretty much identically the same. There's no difference to that. There's no variation. And if it hasn't been working for the best part of 80 minutes, there's no reason to suggest it's going to work in the last 10. So that is very, very concerning, yeah.
Chris, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's Parky ball, isn't it? That's the way he plays. I mean, it's pretty apt. the second season of The Mandalorian's coming out this week, because it's like, this is the way, isn't it? There's no other way. That's Parky's system, and you can see with the changes, it's like for like. He pulls one out, he puts one in who plays in exactly the same role, because that player knows how to do that role. He knows what his defensive duties are. He knows where he needs to be on the pitch. And it's not like, we're drawn 2s each at Rochdale. How about we put 2 up front and try a partnership up front? Why don't we put 2 wide men and, go to a back 4, take one out of the back 3, tell Denver Hume and McLaughlin to bomb on fullbacks and overlap for the last quarter of an hour. There's none of that. He's just got a plan A. I mean, there's no plan B. I mean, talking about the youngsters as well, I mean, I'm always hesitant. It always seems to be the reaction. You usually hear it with England, when England get knocked out of a tournament. It's like, oh my God, bring in the 18-year-olds, bring in the young uns. Why is, and it's always kind of after the fact. But I mean, we've got some good young players at the club, but I don't think. I mean, look at our 11 against Rochdale. They should be going to Rochdale and winning that game. I mean, we shouldn't need to be saying, we need Diamond in, we need Neil in, we need Kimpioka in, because on paper, these players should be doing a job, and the system, I think, is restricting them from going out and beating teams like Rochdale. I mean, Dan Neil looked tired last 20 minutes against Carlisle. I still think, I think Dan Neil looks like he's a fantastic player, looks so comfortable on the ball in possession. He's going to be a cracking player, but I still think he needs a loan move. I really wish he'd gone out on loan last season like Diamond did, because Diamond's come back and Diamond's really kind of looking like he's ready for League One football. But in this system that he's got, I'm struggling to see where the likes of Diamond comes in, because he was okay at right wing back, but that's not his natural position. Kimpioka's a winger, and we don't play wingers. So I'd like to see maybe Kimpioka come on the bench and come on for the last 15 minutes as a partner for a Wyke or a Danny Graham to play off them because he's got a bit of pace. But Parkinson won't do that because he hasn't got a plan B. So I'd love these lads to get some time on the coming off the bench, but I don't think they're fit with what Parkinson is doing.
No, it is a difficult one, isn't it? And I think it's been made more difficult by another player that's in the shadows a little bit at the moment, and that is Aiden McGeady. So obviously there was a poll on the ROKER Report basically saying should he get back into the first team squad. Now when I looked at it earlier, it was 81% said yes, 19% said no. And if you don't know the ins and outs of what's actually happened with McGeady, because it's not just the McDonald's gate, there has also been podcasts going out by Open Goal, and I'll read what's gone on so far. So obviously we had Morgan, who's a play for us last season on loan. He's basically put this out about McGeady. So he is ruthless. I've never seen anyone that ruthless. He'd come in, and I think we drew with Burton or something, and he came into the change room and said, "Yous can't play in front of that. Burton Albion, Wednesday night, one each. Yous will never play any higher than this." Nobody would say anything to him. He would single someone out and everyone was scared of him. Now, so McGeady's this week been on Open Goal himself and defending himself. And to be fair, as you expect, he has put a different sort of slant onto the story. He has come out and said this, though. So the thing is, I won't do his accent, obviously. The thing is, right, your interviews are supposed to be funny and light-hearted. I get that Morgie was trying to tell funny stories, but see, the time and the place was wrong, because obviously the situation I'm in at Sunderland, the story he told, I was getting loads of grief because he said I walked into the dressing room and said, "Yous aren't good enough, yous can't play at a high level." I've got journalists ringing me right after that interview went out, and he was like, "Lewis Morgan said these comments, what have you got to say?" I was like, "Look, mate, this is what happened. I walked in the dressing room, we just drawn 2-2 of Accrington Stanley, no disrespect, but Sunderland should be beating Accrington Stanley. We had a big meeting, Jack Ross gave us an open forum to have a say, loads and loads of people spoke up, and I said, lads, I'm 33 now, chances are I won't play at a higher level again, but I imagine all of you have aspirations to play at a high level, or you should have. If you can't handle the fans getting on at you against Accrington on a Tuesday night, you won't play at a higher level. You've got to be able to bottle that up, block that out, and deal with the pressure." That's what I said, but Morgan made it sound like I went, "Ha ha, you lot won't play at a high level." That's not what I said. If Lee Cattermole or Kevin Ball had said something like that, it would be amazing. What I was saying there was wrong. Why wouldn't I have high standards at a club like Sunderland? If you're accepting 2-2 draw with Accrington Stanley, Sunderland will be in League One for the foreseeable. Now, when that slant's put on it, has he said anything that's wrong? Craig, where do you stand with Aiden McGeady? Should he be back in the team? What should we do with him?
Yeah, so I think if Phil Parkinson is to weather this storm, he needs to win games immediately with conviction, or that noise to bring Aiden McGeady back in from the cold. It's not going to go away. And I think one of the biggest frustrations that fans have got right now is that we are totally oblivious to what has actually gone on behind the scenes. And with so many varying versions of events, like you've just mentioned, Brett, people will honestly not know what to believe. We know Aiden McGeady is a complex character. He's had falling outs with managers in the past. Obviously Chris Coleman notably here. But on the other hand, you look at it and you say he's played for several big clubs. He has almost 100 caps for his country. So you can kind of understand his version of events and why he rightfully wouldn't be happy to settle for a draw at home to Accrington Stanley, because, none of us would. But ultimately, when stuff like this happens, my opinion is that it's a power play from the club. They try and mess with the player's head as much as they can and hope that at one point he's going to turn around and say, right, if you pay me X amount, I'll leave. And I think it's reasonable to suggest that's what Sunderland are perhaps bargaining for here. They're trying to break him down enough so that he'll just walk out on less money and we can obviously save down the road. And if, you all remember that, we went through something similar with Phil Bardsley and Lee Cattermole a few years back. And just like those two, McGeady would be brought back in immediately if the manager was replaced. And perhaps it's just him biding his time. But unbeknown to many, I recently spoke with a player who left us over the summer, and he was pretty adamant that Aiden McGeady was not a disruptive influence at all. And he said that the mood within the dressing room dropped when we went on that long winless run when Phil Parkinson first took charge, which is to be expected because, when you've got a 100-point target set by the owners and you're not winning games, there's always going to be disagreements as to what's going wrong. And then, of course, the little things will emerge more often. Anyway, this player, he told me that there was certainly an unrest around the club, not just exclusive to the dressing room, and Phil Parkinson couldn't find a solution to it. So then after we get beat at Gillingham for the second consecutive week, McGeady has then apparently spoken up to say that results like that were unacceptable and that he was unhappy that he didn't even feature that day. I know there was a lot of comments from people beforehand to say it looked like he wasn't, kind of well engaged or even remotely looking up for it when he was in the warm-up. So something's obviously happened prior. And then you've got the McDonald's incident on the way home, and lo and behold, a few days later, he's essentially bombed out the squad, and we were told that he doesn't have a future here anymore. But I think from Phil Parkinson's side, he's probably going to be looking at this feeling that it's crucial that he keeps the dressing room on his side. And I think his job now is to make sure that the group has that culture where everyone sticks together and that's conducive to a good atmosphere, because any squad member or anybody at all who has a divisive way of his thinking is just going to completely kill us, at least from his perspective. But that being said, though, if we continue to drop points to teams that we shouldn't, or if we look ineffective and struggle to break teams down, then he's got to be looking at alternative options to win games. Now, we don't know how fit Aiden McGeady is. From what we're told, he didn't set the world alight at Charlton last season when he went out on loan. But if you can get him back up to that full fitness, he is a proven goal scorer at this level. I mean, for Christ's sake, when Josh Madger left, he literally was, our only hope. He almost single-handedly carried us to promotion. He scored 2 crucial goals in the EFL trophy. And I know people will perhaps say he's finished and use his age as an excuse not to involve him, but I think if you look at who our player of the season has been so far, maybe it's a little hasty to, be judging somebody just on their age or their lack of involvement, if you like, around our first team or even altogether. I mean, even if you look at, say, somebody like Danny Graham, who's arguably our best striker, he's actually closer to 40 than he is 30. So I'm not on board with saying Aiden McGeady's finished, but if he was to be involved, then we're certainly going to need to get him back up to speed, sooner rather than later. But I think as an overall, what I'd like to see here is I'd like us to draw a line under it, because we can't keep playing out these, kind of scenarios, whether we bring him in or whether we exclude him every time that Cy Ferry does one of these interviews. I think at this point, either both parties come to an agreement and pay him off, or we give him an opportunity to actually earn his wages again, because he's of absolutely no use to us at the moment and he's still earning a small fortune. And you would imagine that he's probably the highest earner still within the squad. So why not actually get something out of him, get some value for the money we're spending? And whatever has happened, move on from it, grow from it. This year has been one of the craziest years that we'll ever experience in existence. So why not just let bygones be bygones, utilise every resource we've got to get out of this division? And I know I've went around the doors with the answer, but yeah, I'd bring Aiden McGeady in, because I think at the moment we are toothless. We need that extra option. So at the moment, it's a yes from me. I would have Aiden McGeady back involved. And I think if it is the case that Phil Parkinson's job is on the line, if it is the case that he's going to be replaced, then I would say with almost certainty that we will see him again in a Sunderland shirt.
I do think it's quite, I think knee-jerk reaction is probably the wrong word to use, but I do believe the longer bad results happen, the Aiden McGeady to get back in the team is only going to get louder and louder and louder. Chris, what's your opinions on it? Do you think he should be back in the squad, or would you still, is he going to mess things up?
Well, I mean, for a start, Craig's right. I think it's one of these things that Parkinson's drawn a line in the sand, with the owners, because I'm fairly certain the owners and Jim Rodwell, and everybody high up in the club will have said he's on a fortune, make him earn his money. I'm absolutely positive of that. And he said, and he's probably turned around and said, if McGeady plays for Sunderland again, he's not going to be there. He's probably told them that he's gone, he's done, he's completely finished with. Otherwise that, the extended stoppage we had was a perfect opportunity to get him in and say, and really talk to the fella and see what was going on. But that hasn't happened. And he's earning, as I said, he's earning a fortune compared to everybody else, and he's not doing anything. And he's a good player. But I mean, as I said, I don't think that'll happen. Craig's exactly right. If Parkinson goes, it might be a possibility. But the thing is, from my point of view as well, all this, clamour for, bring McGeady back. We're struggling for creativity. Look at the 2 players who played behind Charlie White against Rochdale, Maguire and Gooch. They're good players. They're better players than League One. They're probably champion. Well, okay, Maguire spent most of the time in League One, but they're top end League One players. But the problem is, you saw at Rochdale, the ball's played into their feet. They turn around. There was a couple of times when Maguire broke, especially in the first half, and he looked forward, and all he had was Charlie Wyke kind of making a half-hearted attempt, not even to make a run. It was kind of to take a defender away, and it was absolutely no pace whatsoever. He wasn't looking for it in behind. What he was looking for was waiting for Hume and McLaughlin to catch up, get wide, and get a ball into the box. And Maguire had no option other than to turn around, play a backwards pass, or to wait for one of the wide men to catch up with him. Gooch is exactly the same. He had to wait for support. So we bring McGeady in. I mean, McGeady isn't going to suddenly pick up the ball and have all of these different options that Maguire and Gooch just haven't got. So, I mean, even if we bring McGeady back, it's not going to change much in terms of how we play because, as I said earlier, the system restricts our better players from probably kind of showing what they can do.
Yeah, that is the worry that if we do bring him back, where does he even fit into that team with how sort of rigid that Parkinson has it? You know, who'd you take him out if he did come back?
Well, it'll be one of those two. I mean, if you look, it'll be one of those two who played behind Wyke. But like I said, I mean, nothing would change because McGeady would have the same. You know, he'd still have Charlie Wyke in front of him. So nothing would change there.
One thing you both actually did say there was that if Parkinson was sacked, then McGeady would probably get back into the team. Now, again, going on to Twitter, which is always dangerous because what you can see on there, a lot of people are now clamouring for Parkinson to be sacked. Now, obviously, we're under possible new ownership at some point. You know, there's periods of exclusivity that go on forever. You know, so in the likelihood, it is he's not going anywhere for the near time. But if it was your call, Craig, would you sack Phil Parkinson tonight?
Yes. Yeah. I think we know that whoever is in charge of Sunderland under the current regime, if the current regime is going to stay as it is, they're going to be working under severe restrictions. But that being said, the resources at Phil Parkinson's disposal are still beyond the imagination of any other clubs in this league. I think regardless of whatever is going on behind the scenes, this is still an environment where the right manager should be coming in and certainly thriving. And I think I mentioned earlier we've had 11 competitive games this season. We've had 8 in the league. What I would add is a significantly worse league this particular season. So I think that is now sufficient time to actually begin to judge him. I know Jim Rodwell went on record a couple of weeks ago and he was saying our target's to win the league. A few of the players have also mentioned promotion as well, which is certainly more than achievable. Now the table is starting to take shape somewhat and we're already falling behind. Now, I appreciate that, some people may consider it a little reactionary to want to sack your manager after 2 games without a win. And I guess my view isn't just reduced to the previous 2 games that we've had. I think we've now had a calendar year under Phil Parkinson where we've made no progression. I think we're once again sinking to the depths of, kind of like the expectations being that low that, he's actually convincing himself, as you said at the top of the show, that a 2-2 draw away at Rochdale is an acceptable result. And look, I mean, I've never really been a big fan of Phil Parkinson, but whilst I'll concede that at times this season we've looked better defensively, fitter also, I mean, as we've seen over the course of the past 2 games, we're always a moment away from teams working us out. Mm-hmm. And that's not too hard to do. It's been evident. I think certainly again last night, defensive mistakes once again setting in because teams are starting to have a go at us, they're pressing us. It's persistence, as we mentioned, with the same dull game plan. It means that we're easy to play against. And I think players playing out of position, as we've all touched upon, they can be targeted and exploited. Like I said, I know that we're only 8 games in, but the signs are worrying. He appears to have little faith in his new signings. Personally, I can't see anything at present to suggest that O'Brien or Grigg is going to make any sort of significant impact or contribution to us so far because they're not getting the chance. I mean, as I said beforehand, he's discussed the ideas of the 23s and reintroducing them at the expense of Aiden McGeady, but again, it doesn't look like there is a pathway to have them involved. And I think I just view it as simple as this, really. Parkinson's time here has obviously been incredibly eventful and fans have been doing the 180, should he stay, should he go? And he was pretty much on borrowed time after the Bolton game last year, and I think we're kind of circulating around that again. He tried something different. We won a handful of games, and whilst other teams were uncertain about what we were doing and how to play against us, his mindset then, it's pretty much like, I've cracked it, and this is just my plan now. I don't need the alternative. I've got my winning formula. And where in reality is, once we get worked out, it's exactly as you both mentioned, we've got no plan B. There's nothing on the bench because of his own, persistence in those selections that people can come in and change it. It was like for like last night. And I mean, that's why we ran out of steam last season, because it was the over-reliance on those players.
Yep.
And I think for me, that's why after 8 games already, I could honestly say with 100% hand on heart that will not be promoted under him playing the way that we are at the moment. My kind of last point on this is we need to start remembering just, who exactly we are. 12 months ago, performances under Jack Ross were deemed not good enough, whether right or wrong. This despite us being sat in the playoffs. We've just knocked Burnley and Sheffield United out of the League Cup. Pretty good performances. But Charlie Murphy went on record. He said the data suggested that we'd end the season in 8th if we allowed Jack Ross to continue. Of course, we did eventually finish in 8th. But I think over the course of that 12-month period, what's happened is the run of results have been that poor, that bad, that we've actually just grown accustomed to it. And all of a sudden, we're starting to convince ourselves to say, actually, he's doing a pretty okay job. He was brought in to get the extra 10% out of the players. That was in his opening statement. He was going to give us this extra edge. And his remit was promotion. He failed. I think he gets off somewhat lightly because of the COVID situation. And obviously the way that the season transpired and was curtailed. That being said, we should have been promoted last season. The league wasn't as good as it was in season 1. I still believe Jack Ross would have got us promoted. I still believe he would now. But Phil Parkinson is not the right man for Sunderland. I don't think it's a knee-jerk reaction based upon what we've seen from fans so far over the course of the past 24 hours or so. We've all watched the performances unfold this season. We watched the Crew game where, realistically speaking, we should have ran away 4-5-0 winners, and you're still sitting out the last 15 minutes concerned that potentially, they could nick an equaliser. I think we've become that sort of easy and boring that there's just nothing... There's just nothing quite there, really, for me that offers that sort of inspiration to say at the back end of this season that we're going to be getting promoted. The issue, of course, like you've rightly said, is due to the current ownership situation, we have not got a clue what's going to unfold. The reality is, if new owners are going to come in, you would expect that he would get sacked. It was pretty much the exact way that Chris Coleman's time obviously came to an end here, because it's a brand new clean start. You would perhaps expect the same with Parkinson. But if it is the case that the current regime ought to remain in charge, then I really think that we've got to start exploring alternatives, because by this time next week, we're going to be 10 games in. The season's running away pretty quickly, and as things stand, we're 7 points off top of the league to a team like Lincoln. Yes, we have the good old fabled game in hand, but come on, how many times have we said that? That was obviously, the pressing thing under Jack Ross's time. Well, don't worry, we've got 2 or 3 games in hand. But the idea is that Sunderland have got to go out and make sure that we win those games in hand, and we've displayed so many times that we're not the side to go out and obviously chase that position down. And my overwhelming concern is that the cracks are there. I don't think that we've ironed out the problems that we've had from the back end of last season. Like I said, defensively, perhaps a little more solid, excluding the last 2 games, but we're still toothless up front. I still can't quite get my head around why he's, completely ostracised Will Grigg from the group. Grigg has a relatively okay pre-season. He starts well against Hull, 2 disallowed goals. And then again, you'll never see him again. So there's something amiss. I honestly don't think that, Phil Parkinson will last the season. I really don't. Regardless of whatever happens over the course of the next week, I still maintain that he's not the right man here. Not when you've got somebody like the Cowley brothers out there who might come in and add a little bit of spark, add a bit of invention, maybe give us a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan. You've got somebody like Paul Cook who's waiting in the wings for another job offer as well. Those are viable options, people who are going to come in and give us that attacking football. But with Phil Parkinson, again, I'm sure he's a nice bloke. I don't want to make too many disparaging comments, but he's just not a big enough personality, name or character for this football club.
Well, Chris, how do you respond to that?
How do I follow that, Craig? Well, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, we're a year on, and if you look at go back to last kind of September, October, and Lincoln City away was our 11th league game of the season. We got beat 2-0, and we were in 6th. And if you look at the current league table, we're currently 7th, but with that game in hand, as Craig mentioned, we could go into 5th. So, I mean, remember that after that Lincoln game, it was building up, and, the fans kind of just lost it, and they were looking at the league table and saying, well, Jack Ross is going to get us between, 4th and 8th. And it just maybe depends on that bit of luck, whether we get the rub of the green or a decision or something like that. That means we kind of get into those bottom 2 playoff positions. And I think a year on, I think we're in exactly the same position. So we've got, I mean, I'd say if in ideal circumstances, if we had an ownership who were running the club and were involved in looking at what's going on, rather than trying to sell the club and pass these decisions on to somebody else, they'd be looking at this and saying, well, we've got another decision to make, because 12 months ago we made a decision when we were in this exact position. So 12 months ago, they rolled the dice. They said, well, Jack Ross is going to get us into the playoffs. We're going to try and get someone to get us into top 2. Parkinson didn't do that. And currently, so far this season, he's doing pretty much exactly the same thing as Jack Ross was doing. I'll say except, but I mean, if you just go through the games, we haven't kind of comprehensively kind of beat anybody. We've kind of beat people by default. We've scored chances that, we've suddenly getting out of the blue, out of nothing. We haven't kind of created, games where we've consistently created 3 or 4 really kind of clear-cut chances where you think, oh yeah, we were all over them. We really kind of battered them and played well. We've controlled certain games, but it's kind of this. Every game is a slog to watch, and that's the Phil Parkinson way. And if it carries on, we've got to accept that that's the system and that's the style. So they've got a decision to make, but unfortunately, I don't think they're concentrating on that decision. I think, as far as they're concerned, if they've got a deal on the table and they're working that out, I think Phil Parkinson will be fine as far as they're concerned to keep us bobbing along in those playoff positions, and they're happy to pass the buck onto the next regime. If it was me and I took over the club today, I'd change the manager. But who that might be, I mean, I think there's tons of managers out there who'll take us on. I think there's managers out there who itching at the chance to take Sunderland back up to the Championship. So yeah, I'd change it.
Wow, so that's both of you getting rid of Phil Parkinson. Interesting there. So, I say the people are getting. It's going to get louder and louder, isn't it? And basically, I don't think people would be so bothered about the dull football if we were first or second. I think we could live with that because we look like we're progressing somewhere. At the moment, it's just negative, and now the results are also following the negative play as well. So, yeah, I think, I don't think you're alone in thinking that it's time to get rid of him. Moving forward, though, so this Saturday, Gillingham, they lost yesterday 1-0 to a late Ipswich strike. And they've actually lost the last 4 games, currently sitting 16th in League One. Chris, for yourself then, I think we know that what team Parkinson's pretty much going to play, but who's Parkinson going to play, and who would you play on Saturday?
Well, O'Neill will come back in on the right, I imagine. Willis will come back in at the back, because I'm pretty sure he'll be kind of getting back to fitness again. I haven't heard anything any different on that, but I expect Willis to come back in. I expect Flanagan to keep his place because he didn't do a huge amount wrong. In midfield, Ledbetter is going to come back in. Max Power's going to keep that position because Parkinson thinks he's doing something right there. And up top, Charlie White scored, so he's going to keep the shirt. But I just think he's dictating how we're playing at the moment, and Parkinson appears to love that. He thinks it's fantastic that we're playing that way, and he's got that physicality up front. But do we need it? The problem is when he's there, we're getting nothing comes through the middle. It all goes wide, balls into the box. Half of them are aimless. They clear them with no problems. Charlie White doesn't get on the end of them. Yeah, he's getting on the score sheet, fantastic. But problem is he's completely dictating the pattern of play. But I'm fully expecting him to be up front the weekend again.
So who would you change instead then?
For me, Danny Graham and Will Grigg are better footballers, and I think one of them needs a run. I'd like to see Danny Graham, either of them, to be honest. But I think if they get a run, you'll soon see our pattern of play change. That will play more through the middle. We'll play off them. We'll kind of have, he'll get in behind, and we'll have Maguire running with the ball, and he'll actually have an option in front of him, which he hasn't got at the minute. So I'd just like to see us get in behind more, which is just something it's just not an option at the minute.
Craig, what's your thoughts on that? Are you pretty much agreeing with Chris on who Parkinson's going to play?
Yeah, I think the decision itself, it's that kind of a customary now that you don't expect any changes unless it's like due to disciplinary or it's due to injury. Ideally, we've discussed systems and plan Bs and things like that. I still can't quite get my head around after like all these seasons in this league why we don't go play two up front somewhere. I think if you look back in all of our sort of recent or over the past, kind of 20, 30 years of promotion seasons, we've played sort of attractive attacking football. We've played two people up front, whether that's Gates and Gabby Adini, whether it's, a combination of Craig Russell and Phil Gray, Quinn and Phillips, Stephen Elliott, Marcus Stewart. Every single season, there is always a duo. And I'm kind of fully in agreement there. I'd like to see Will Grigg get a run because, again, it's another bench warmer who's on an awful lot of money, and you think it's something at some point. Somebody's going to have to try and get a tune out of him. And it must be incredibly disheartening for a player like him who had a relatively good pre-season. Like I said, he started the season okay against Hull. Obviously unfortunate that he had the 2 goals chalked off. You know what? He missed a penalty, big deal. But then he's dropped. And then when he does come in, he's scrapping for 5 minutes here and there. So he's not getting a good run. Same with Danny Graham as well. Honestly, I think he's an upgrade on Charlie White. But the thing that Charlie White keeps doing at present is he keeps scoring goals. And you can't drop him based on obviously his goal return, which is something we probably all thought we'd never see. But
it's quite interesting that we're moaning about that player scoring goals because we can't drop him.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's a funny one. But that being said, even so, you could still potentially look at playing Charlie White alongside somebody. He's a big lad. He should be winning the aerial battles. I mean, granted, I don't think he wins enough. I think obviously he concedes an awful lot of fouls. But that being said, I think if you relieve the burden off him, because playing up front alone, it is going to be an isolating experience. And I'm sure if he did have somebody to, kind of relieve the burden, then who knows, it might bring even more out of him. So I'd honestly like us to go take the game to him. We've got to win. Phil Parkinson has to win this game. I know it's only going to be our 9th game of the season, but we're already in must-win territory. You don't want to be falling 10 points behind teams at this stage of the season, because if you do, then you can start writing it off already. So whilst I think the team is pretty much going to pick itself, I just want to see Phil Parkinson be a bit more ambitious, be a bit braver, have a bit more imagination and say, you know what, we're going to take the game to these. We're going to be whipping balls in. We're going to be frightening the life out of them. Put somebody like Jack Diamond or Benji Kimbioka on the bench, somebody raw, somebody with a bit of, energetic sort of bursts that we don't know what is going to produce, but put the defence under pressure, run at people, draw fouls, continuously put them under pressure. But that being said, I guarantee we'll be flashing forward to Saturday. It'll be the slow build-up, long ball, lethargic play, and we'll be sat moaning on about it again. But he's got to try something different at some point.
No, that's exactly it. Well, Chris, what's your predictions for Saturday?
Yeah, Gillingham away. I think it's going to be a very similar prospect to Rochdale, although they've lost 4 off the bounce, so potential banana skin. But I just think we're going to go. It's going to be a lot of people are going to complain about paying a tenner for it. It's going to be a slog to watch. It's going to be painful to watch, and I'm going for a 1-1 draw.
1-1 draw. That is always one of the stats that I hate hearing the most, that a team's on a losing run or a striker's not scored for 10 games or something like that. Because if you want to end one of those, play Sunderland, because 9 out of 10 times you'll get that result.
Yeah, I was there 20 years ago or something when Aiden McGeady scored. I was at Filbert Street, and everybody talked about it in the morning. You just knew he was going to score.
The law of Aiden McGeady, that's exactly what it is. Craig, what's your feelings for Saturday?
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that in 3 of those last 4 games that Gillingham have played, it's been against our rival promotion contenders, if you like. So they've got beat off Ipswich, they've got beat off Fleetwood, and they've got beat off Portsmouth. So if we have any aspirations to basically match them, we've got to go and win this game. I think we'll concede because we are starting to look somewhat shaky at the back. But, I'm going to actually back us to go and win this game. I think it'll be 2-1. It'll probably be ugly. It'll probably not be worth the tenner, but you know what? We've got to go and win this game.
So you're going 2-1. Right, I'm going to end this podcast on a really positive note. So we're going to win 4-0 and everything's going to be rosy, and next week's pod's going to be a really, really happy one. But gentlemen, we are done. Craig, thank you so much for coming on board.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me.
And Chris, as always, it's an absolute pleasure speaking to yourself.
Cheers, Brett. Always a pleasure.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. That'd be there on Acast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. We'll see you again soon. Take care.